Here about the political tsunami that has just hit Paris.
Il a trompé les plus hautes autorités du pays.
He fooled the highest authorities in the country, the president, the government, all the French people. It's an unforgivable mistake.
The French president, who landed this Wednesday in Morocco for a state visit that's been overshadowed as he rushed to comment on the confession of Jérôme Cahuzac, who until a few weeks ago was François Hollande's budget minister. The 61-year-old socialist, after months of denial, now admitting to stashing 600,000 euros over 2 decades in secret offshore bank accounts, the fruits of his lucrative hair transplant clinic and per diems from pharmaceutical companies. Otherwise put, the man Hollande put in charge of cracking down on tax evasion. This photo from a November 20th press conference outside Paris, all the while had secret accounts in Switzerland and Singapore. We're going to not only follow the money of Dr. Cahuzac, we're also going to evaluate, less than 1 year after the Strauss-Kahn affair, the impact on France's embattled political establishment. Today, in the France 24 debate, he lied. A look at the Cahuzac case. With us to talk about it, she's a columnist at the Sunday Telegraph, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. Also with us, Aude Baron, deputy editor of the nouvelups.com, the website of the French news weekly magazine Le Nouvel Observateur. Welcome as well. Also with us, Thomas Guenole. He teaches at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po. Welcome, sir. And welcome as well to New York attorney Alexander Blumrosen. Welcome to the show, the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Now, after months of denial, first came 2 weeks ago the resignation, and then on Tuesday, the confession.
The denials were made in public, the confession in private. Last December, in front of his colleagues and the TV cameras in the National Assembly, Jérôme Cahuzac categorically denied any wrongdoing after the French investigative website Mediapart published evidence that he held offshore accounts.
I do not have, nor have I ever had, offshore accounts. Not now, nor ever.
He repeated the denials on French television and radio and filed suit against Mediapart, but a formal judicial investigation into Cahuzac's finances began. He resigned from his post as junior budget minister while continuing to protest his innocence. But on Tuesday, a spectacular backtrack. In judges' chambers, Cahuzac admitted he had stashed 600,000 euros in a Swiss bank account. He later released a statement on his website.
I was caught in a spiral of lies, and I made a mistake. I am filled with remorse.
Cahuzac had had the support of the French president and prime minister when he made his repeated denials.
I spoke to him to tell him that he had betrayed us. I told him that he had lied. And for us, that was profoundly shocking.
President François Hollande's approval rating was already taking a beating. Now the revelation that the man who was in charge of the country's finances was a tax fraud comes as a major embarrassment for the government.
A major embarrassment after such staunch denials, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, on the floor of the National Assembly.
Yes, I mean, in France, you do not own up to a mistake, because then it's a bit like the Roman arena. It's thumbs down, and then you're absolutely condemned by everyone, especially people who've known you for quite some time and supported you, and that's exactly what we're seeing him now. He is at fault. He should not have lied, but he was lying because he was desperately hoping that it would not come out. And it's a fascinating tragedy in many ways, and it's also a political upheaval.
He was lying because he thought it might not come out. He thought he had a fighting chance. Why is that?
I think we should ask the expert, but I suspect he thought that it was so difficult to go and investigate, especially since he'd moved his Swiss account to Singapore, which is supposed to be very opaque. And what we know in the past 5-7 years, and I'm sure I will be borne out by the specialists, is that the French tax people now have incredible means and resources, and they've become electronically extremely savvy. They've got new deals. They've got more powers in France to investigate you. They can listen to your telephone and get a warrant for this afterwards, for instance. There's all sorts of means that they have to find out things in France and abroad. And he himself, even though he was working as the minister of some of these people, he still could not sort of hide it.
Alexander Blumrosen, is it indeed harder to follow the money?
I'm not sure if it's harder to follow the money, but he must have been at least naive and possibly much worse, because he was in charge of the tax fraud issues at the Ministry of the Economy. He knew what tools were available. And as we just heard, and this is in fact the case, since 2008, governments around the world have cracked down. They've cracked down on money laundering, they've cracked down on drug money, on terrorist money, and on individuals who are not paying their taxes. And there is a panoply now of tools available to governments to go get information from neighboring countries, including now in Switzerland, that Mr. Cahuzac clearly knew about because he was implementing those. So it's hard for me to understand how he thought he was going to get away with it.
I suppose the question is how early he moved his money from Switzerland to Singapore. Well,
apparently he moved it in 2010, from all reports that we have heard. But the prosecution has said that he is potentially liable and is being accused of what they call money laundering, blanchiment of fraude fiscale, so recycling money that was hidden from the French treasury in accounts, and those accounts go back to 1990. So the accounts were opened in 1990, and he kept putting money into them during that time.
Okay, so accounts opened in 1990, and it's the way the story has broken this week, it's of course upstaged François Hollande's state visit to Morocco. Hollande recording a statement before touching down in the Moroccan capital.
It's an outrage committed against the Republic. The alleged facts are themselves intolerable. To hold an undeclared foreign account. All the details will be made clear, and the judiciary will do its work getting to the bottom of this, with complete independence. I can confirm that Jérôme Cahuzac did not get any protection other than the presumption of innocence. He left the government at my request at the start of the inquiry. What has happened is an enormous shock, since it is a total breach of our values.
Did not get any political protection. However, Le Monde says in its front page editorial this Wednesday, the Cahuzac scandal has become in an instant the François Hollande affair. Over the past 6 months, the loss of credit of the head of state has already been profound and handicapped his actions. It risks becoming unfathomable and paralyzing. In the eyes of the French, either he was naive or incompetent, or he more or less covered up the lie. In either case, the failing is deep. And to pile on the pain, French news weekly Le Point on Thursday will publish a story that says that the French presidency knew before the end of December that Cahuzac was lying about his stashed cash. Thomas Guenole, is this a storm that's going to blow over? Or is François Hollande in trouble?
Well, in fact, you, madam, were speaking about tragedy. Well, we could say there is something rotten in the Kingdom of France nowadays. Nowadays, the idea, once again, just like during the 90s in France, the public opinion feels that any politician in France has to be corrupted, has to be rotten. That's the problem here. The idea that someone who is the head of the budget in France can lie to the face of all MPs and to, it's not just that he lied, it's the way he lied with, straight poker face, no problem. I mean, we can now understand what Americans felt about Bill Clinton. It wasn't what he did, it was lying about it. So we have a problem of public trust here. It's something that can not easily be repaired, and to be honest, I don't think it can be repaired at all.
Aude Baron, do you agree?
Well, actually, when you read most of the reaction of the internet, especially on Twitter and the blog, it was interesting because you had a reaction in 3 steps. First, it was, just a shock. And everyone, for example, was retweeting, the news saying, oh my God, impossible. And then you have a second step and everyone accused Cahuzac, and judging him. And you can read since yesterday the word of being very strong. Of course, what he did, is shocking. But on the Socialist Party, everyone is condemning him. And the third step was the emotion. And there was a very striking emotion. It was one of the Socialists, Gérard Filoche, and he was on the show on television. And actually, we interviewed the journalist who was supposed to interview him on a totally different subject. And just before entering on the set, 1 minute before, they told him, okay, maybe we should talk about Cahuzac. And they said yes. And then they were on live. And you could see him, he's only almost crying. And this image, this video, is just, being
almost
seen.
Crying because he genuinely felt betrayed?
Because he was so angry. Because he just couldn't understand. And as Thomas Guenole was saying, it wasn't what he did. It's the fact he lied, and he lied and he seemed to be very confident. And that seemed, all the socialists, they feel betrayed.
At the outset of this affair, a divorce. That of Cahuzac and his wife, Patricia, an acrimonious one by the looks of things, that is still ongoing, the divvying up of their assets, helping Anne-Elisabeth Moutet to trigger the leaks in this case.
It's one of the lessons of the recent scandals. You have Cahuzac, who ought not to have divorced so badly from his wife. Before that, you had another French politician, Thierry Gaubert, who used to be budget minister under Chirac, and whose wife, the Princess Helen of Yugoslavia, shopped to the French authorities for all sorts of things, because also the divorce had been very bad. And in Britain, of course, we've got the amazing Chris Huhne case of the environment minister who asked his wife to take points for speeding because otherwise his driver's license would have been withdrawn, and who lied repeatedly about this. And the British are sort of fairly serious about these things, and both he and his wife have gone to jail over this. And the reason why his wife finally shopped him was that he left her for his parliamentary assistant. So the lesson is be very careful about what you do if you either your private life is above suspicion or your financial life is above suspicion, but you can't have both.
You can't have both. And in this case, we're seeing also, this is another interesting aspect, how he got the money. And a lot of people in France are now discovering his private life. This is a man who, besides being a politician, was a doctor, a successful one, and who had, along with his wife, a clinic that did hair implants. And there's also questions about relations with pharmaceutical companies. You were mentioning, Thomas Guenole, about how the feeling that all politicians are corrupt. Is there also this general feeling, you could say, when you speak to businessmen now, that all businessmen are corrupt and that you have to always sweeten the deal if you're talking to a pharmaceutical company? When you're just talking about it with clients, is that something that comes up?
I've personally have never come across that in my practice, and I'm not sure it's a generalized practice, but I think what we have here is a case of money laundering that is really quite simple, naive, and minor league. This is simply a doctor 20 years ago who was getting either kickbacks or consulting fees and wanted to avoid paying taxes on it. And so he found a way to put that money in Switzerland. And little did he realize at the time that 20 years later, because of 9/11, because of the enforcement tactics and strategies of all the tax administrations around the world, that he would get caught up in this net. And that nobody today is as forgiving about this hiding money from tax administrations as they were 20 years ago.
Now, 24 hours ago on this very set, we were discussing the new 75% payroll tax on revenue above 1 million euros. One of the panelists was mentioning how, in any case, the rich never pay taxes. Are you suggesting that that's no longer going to be the case in the future?
Oh, I think the rich have ways of what they call optimizing their tax situation, which do not include putting the money that they have gotten in France or elsewhere into a numbered or an unnamed account in a foreign jurisdiction. They have a much more sophisticated means of optimizing their tax situation today.
All right, a couple of reactions on our social networks. On Twitter, we have one person who said, remember what Cahuzac said about French actor Gérard Depardieu leaving. This is so ironic. And we have Eric in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam saying, the French have the nerve then to preach to Africans and other developing countries about good governance. Thomas Guenole, is this affair, again, going to be something that tarnishes the perception of France and of this government and its promise during the campaign to make a fresh start of it when it came to previous affairs?
Well, the first abroad, it's already happening, in fact. You can easily imagine what can be printed in foreign newspapers or aired on foreign TVs about the fact that a minister who was in charge of fighting against tax fraud is actually a tax frauder. So that's the first immediate damage. Inside, well, it was in Le Monde, you quoted that. Either the president of the French Republic was incompetent or he covered up the thing. So it's a lose-lose situation for him, politically speaking.
And what's the answer to that question, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet?
Both cases are possible, but I would say, first of all, this is a country in which there was a tradition of being, let's put it this way, chary of the taxman. You'd have something built in your house, and then you'd pay some of it just in cash, and you wouldn't pay the 19.6% VAT on it. And one of the best measures that has been taken in France against tax fraud was to lower on a number of activities, especially in building and construction, was to lower VAT to 5.5%, at which stage people said, well, it's really not worth not having a guarantee, not having anything. I'm quite willing to cough up 5.5% so that I understand that actually the state gained instead of losing by lowering the tax level. But this is not a lesson that the socialists seem to have learned. They think that if you raise taxes, you're going to raise tax income, and that is usually not the case.
All right. Briefly on this, is this going to weigh again on the debate over taxation?
Well, I'm not sure, but I was pretty sure that it's going to weigh on the government. And what was pretty interesting is a philosopher wrote on our website, Le Plus, a chronicle saying, and he was asking, why do we always think that politicians are guilty? You know, and he say, when you take a politician, whatever he can say, for the people, he's always guilty somewhere. And why are we so much shocked? Is it because he lied, or is it because he admitted he lied? And it's quite seldom when someone we know in politics say, okay, I lied.
All right, the confession, something the French don't always see. When we come back, we'll pick up on that. You're watching the France 24 debate.